I wish I had learned this truth many years ago. Be thankful for the days, good and
Welcome
bad.
to Warrior versus Zombie. This is Dave Roberts, and we have an exciting episode and show for you here today. Be talking to Mica Alexander. For those of you who are joining us first time with Warrior versus Zombie, Warrior versus Zombie is a show where I'll interview warriors of various types. Artists, entrepreneurs, practitioners, business owners, basically aspiring leaders from every aspect of life. And by the way, moms and dads are leaders, people who lead ministry, people obviously in the military. It doesn't matter. And in fact, I find leaders every time I have an opportunity to talk to them. So today we're going to be talking to Mica Alexander. Let me tell you a little bit about Mica, but she's going to tell you a lot more in a second here. She tells me, and what I know about her is she's an adventurer at heart. She's traveled the world as a military spouse with 3 kids in tow, which has got to be a challenge. Actually, in that regard, I just have to bring in the fact that my daughter is a military spouse and she has 3 kids in tow. So we have a lot in common there. And as I've gotten to know Mica, she's educated me a number of things on what it's like to go through that being on the front line. So I admire her for that. She's used to figuring things out on her own. And I think that's sometimes a warrior thing, right? If we can't find an answer, somebody can't give us an answer. Life is a team sport, but she's used to figuring things out on her own. She loves connecting and sharing stories. And really, she's a servant leader, and that's the beauty. It's funny because the warriors that we have on this show, almost without exception so far, and I'm sure that'll be the case, are really servant leaders. If you really understand the definition of that, they're people who are really about impacting the world outside themselves. She's got 2 master's degrees, and she has an MBA and an MA in counseling and psychology. She's been a behavioral healthcare executive. Maybe she's analyzing me right now for 15 years. And prior to what she's doing now, which is an awesome endeavor called Tokyo Escapes, which has to be kind of amazing in this particular time that we're in with house arrest or shelter in place or quarantine, however you want to classify it. So welcome, Mica. Thank you for being here. And let's check in a little bit. So how are you doing? We're doing, this is a first podcast from home. You know, everybody's doing these things from home, and I'm doing this now via Zoom with you, even though we're in the same city. So instead of in the studio. So what do you think about all this?
Thank you, David, for having me. I'm so excited. So I'm the first Zoom, huh? That's pretty awesome. I'm doing well. You know, it's trying times, definitely. But I have to say, and I'll talk more about this as we go, but wearing mask is something, we lived in Japan, so wearing mask is something we're kind of used to in our family. Trying to make the best of it here at home and trying to have somewhat of a normal routine inside, right? We have some teenage girls, so they got lots of energy, and keeping them with their schooling and keeping them entertained and, you know, make sure we're exercising, make sure we're eating right. I haven't baked in a long time, and I baked yesterday, and I do have to say it really didn't turn out well. Which the kids had a great laugh. I had a great laugh. It tasted great, but it just didn't turn out well. It didn't look right. Which I'm like, you know, that's how it is. You try something, and if it goes your way, it's great. But then you look, and I'm like, okay, I can do this different
you are a warrior.
Next time.
You powered through that, right? Yeah, it's fascinating to me. When you say wearing a mask is natural, we had talked before we started the show about wearing glasses, and that's not comfortable. And for sure, wearing masks is not comfortable to me, except maybe on Halloween, you know. And then, you know, it's funny because I've noticed a lot of people with masks, and I'll wear one. It's a bandana that I put around, and then I'll try to put on a cowboy hat, when I go out, so it looks like I'm in costume. But it almost is. Some people are like they're wearing the masks to hide, but other people are like, okay, now I can be something different. So it's kind of fascinating for me. But we all adapt in our own ways, and that's awesome.
Definitely. Well, and when we got back to the States a couple of years ago, my daughter, our middle daughter's in high school, and she got pretty sick, and then she went back to school. She wasn't running a fever at that time, and this was several years ago. And so she wore a mask to school, and her teachers were like, "Are you all right? Like, is something wrong? Are you contagious?" Like they just because that's what she did in Japan. So it was just by natural. And she's like, Mom, everybody was staring at me, but she was doing it so that she didn't get anybody else sick. It was out of consideration for other people. So yeah, it's a different paradigm. It's a
Yeah,
different way of
and
thinking.
definitely
Definitely.
one of the things I have always closed most of my emails and messages is stay inspired, but today I say stay safe and inspired. And when it comes to kids, I think it's not just catching the virus, but they got to survive in the household, right? Because as a parent, I mean, I have five kids, and I can't imagine. Well, it would be very hard for me to imagine having to have all five of those at home and them not being able to get out during this time as teenagers, or even as young kids. My daughter's kids are 5, 4, and an infant. So that's a little different, but still, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was just talking to our older son who's in college, and he's still away there at college. And even though the university closed down, he's working. And he asked me today if me and the girls were getting along. Because he knows. And I know my husband's definitely feeling it because, he went from having a son in the house and now he has two teenage daughters and myself.
So
So
he's
he's the only
outnumbered. I'm
guy.
used to that. I have four daughters, and and had female, so yes, I get that. I get the estrogen overload.
Yes,
So
definitely.
any
Definitely.
we're gonna land the plane for this segment, but any takeaways that you would offer with your background, before we obviously there's things that you're gonna share in your story, but just in this point in time, if you could tell people one thing about dealing with this crisis that we're going through today specifically, is there one thing that you would say?
Well, I would say it's really important, that I don't know about yourself, but I know a lot of families, there's somebody that sets the tone, kind of the tone and the atmosphere of the family. And for our family, it's me. So the more that I'm on, the more that I'm positive, the more that I have energy, the better off my family
Hmm.
is. And I would say that for everybody. The thing about what's going on today is, yeah, you need to keep up with the CDC, you need to keep up with the news, but don't have it on all the time. I tell this to our parents, and to our friends. I have a lot of friends that work in the healthcare field. I think it's really important to just, you got to stay positive. And because people, if you're all down and out and, oh, this is so bad and it's never going to finish, you're going to feel that energy from, you're going to give that off. So the more positive you can be, the better. And this too shall pass, and it will. And it's not going to be quick, but we'll get through it. I mean, we're America. We're
Right.
the greatest country in the world, right? We this is not, just if you think about all the things that we've done in history, this is hard, but it's not unbearable. I mean, we've overcome time and
Well,
time
that's
again.
awesome. I
So,
think that I've given that advice a few times, but yeah, we're all aspiring leaders. We set the tone. So as a warrior, you're setting the tone again, whether it's for your family or not. The other thing is that you said that I think is really important is it's hard to be positive if what you're putting in all the time is stress and anxiety. So listening to the news, I can always tell when I'm talking to somebody like you mentioned parents, like even my kids, where they have too much time on their hands and they're using that time listening to all the various fear and, and again, it's part of our media, right? It's part of, to get you to listen, they want you to be fearful or anxious because that makes you want to listen more, right? But that's a zombie. In my world, that's a zombie behavior. That's basically you're consuming something without really the intention or the understanding of what it is you're hoping to get out of it. And so that's beautiful. That's great advice. Well, we're going to take a quick break, Mica, and then we're going to come back. We hit a little bit of Ricky Jean Wright and It's Not the Getting There as our theme song. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about your journey, your story a little bit. So we'll be back shortly with Mica Alexander.
But the miles become the teacher while the student learns real slow, traveling blind most of the time. Wherever you go, it's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see.
All right, we're back with Warrior versus Zombie and Mica Alexander, and I'm excited to hear literally how she got to be here today. I know she's come from the other side of the globe, but she's been all over, world traveler in her life, and I already know her as a warrior, and I want to hear a little bit of her warrior story that's brought her to the place where she is right now. So welcome back, and Mica, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. So I was thinking about, whenever people ask me this question, well, what's your journey or where have you been? I literally think, how many countries? No, that's not what you mean. Where have you been and how did I get here? Well, I have a diverse story, as you said. My mother was a college professor, so we moved a lot when I was younger, and unlike, very similar to the military. And unfortunately, I had a pretty abusive stepfather, and so growing up in that environment was toxic. But I knew that whenever I went to college, I was going to do something to help people, and so that's my mantra: is helping people and serving others. I went through college pretty quickly, got my master's and had my first master's at 23, went on to work in the prison system of all places, where you wouldn't believe it, but there was actually a lot of kindness. I think perhaps, people joke with me and they say, well, you had their attention. I was this young female, but I don't think that was it. I think a lot of it was because I was real with them. I treated them like people. I provided hope to them. I pushed them to do better. And that's where I really found my passion in helping people, was in the prison system. As a young female executive, I rose in ranks, went on to work in behavioral health for another 10 years. Married my husband. We have 3 kids, and he just retired actually from the Air Force. So I met him when he was at his first assignment, and that was in Minot, North Dakota. So, yes, that's when we first got together. So was in Minot, North Dakota. And we moved all over the United States. We lived in Europe. We lived in Asia. We lived in Japan specifically. And I stayed home. I've done both. When the kids were younger, I did more staying home because he was always deployed. But then I was able to go back and get my MBA. I was able to travel extensively, which was a pretty awesome blessing. Unfortunately, my husband was serving. He was at the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So a lot of times I would travel without him, just to get out from wherever we were living, to have adventures, to show the kids the history and the cultures and all that. So that's kind of where I got the traveling bug. So when we got back to the States a couple years ago, everybody kept asking us about Japan. I was at that point, professionally, I was kind of like, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back into behavioral health? But there's an opportunity. I'm like, well, I have my MBA. Maybe I should put it to use. Let's see what we can do. And so I founded Tokyo Escapes, and we take people to Japan and provide them awesome adventures. But honestly, when I think about the gist of who I am, it's to help and to serve others. I think as a military spouse, serving people and meeting people where they're at is really important because it's not for everybody. It's tough. I'm not going to say that it was always easy. And unfortunately, I can't say there are a lot of couples I know that served in the amount of years that my husband was with the Air Force that are still together. So, he was in the Air Force 21 years. We've been married 18 years. And we know so many couples that they just didn't stay. It was just really tough and challenging, and being apart that much, because as with history, the wars really kicked off around 2004, went kind of full throttle up until about 2010, 11. And then we still have so many troops over there. There's still heavy deployments there. So it hasn't been easy, but I tell you, just like in my intro, you said, I figure things out. I'm used to figuring things out. We have this saying in our family that, when Dad was away, things would always happen in threes. And that's true. Like, things would always happen in threes, that, something would break. A kid would end up in the emergency room. The tire would go flat. Something would happen with the bank, whatever it was. So, but we've thrived and we've adapted. And I just feel really fortunate and blessed that we've had so many adventures and opportunities. And I really want to pass that along to our clients, because there's a whole world out there, man. It's awesome.
Well, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear your story. You, as I suspected, and as I already felt, you definitely are a warrior. I think obviously there's many things that have occurred in your life that the zombies that the warrior has to fight, that you could go the other way. You could have gone, like you said, you could have retreated from your marriage. You could have said, okay, I'm not going to break out of this routine that I think serves me better, or you had a choice, and you chose to keep battling forward towards your vision with your intent. And I think that's awesome. And that's a great testimony. And I'm sure it's a great example to your kids. And it'll be a great example to those that you're influencing in your journey moving forward. Let me ask you, so of all of those things in your story up to this point, and this is kind of a tough question, but yet, what one zombie or one thing did you feel was one of the toughest things for you to overcome into getting to where you are today?
Okay, I'm gonna try not to get emotional, David.
It's okay.
It's a tough story. But I can talk about it now, so that's good. So my husband was a combat search and rescue pilot. What that meant was that for most of his career, he would go in under hostile fire and get people out. He did a lot of things in, he rescued for Katrina, which was tough. He rescued in Iraq and Afghanistan. But everything was tough. But so when we lived in England, it was 2000. It was right before we moved to Japan. It was 2014. And he went out on a mission. And every time he flies, he tells me I'm flying. Just so you know, I'm going to be up in the air, because it's obviously he can't be on the cell phone, right? If he's in the air. So he always would tell me his flight schedule. He'd always tell me when he's flying. And he said, I'm flying. And, it came to around 10 o'clock at night, and I hadn't heard from him. And he called me. And at that point, my Facebook blew up. people messaging me, and I'm like, what's going on? Well, something had happened, and they were on a training mission. Trent was actually supposed to fly that night, and he didn't. And a helicopter crashed, and it took the lives of 4 people, friends of ours. Mm. So that was, I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's that. I'll jump in here for a second, but first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I don't know that I've said it up to this point, but I want to say that I'm getting emotional. I appreciate your service, and not just. I mean, I do appreciate your husband's service and those who are putting their lives on the line, but I can see it and I can hear it in your voices that it takes its toll. And being a warrior and battling through those things, we don't think about some of those things. We say, well, that's happening to somebody else, but not knowing and being in a near miss sometimes is worse than being actually in it, because you have the guilt and the people, the friends that you lost, and just thinking, I mean, there's all kinds of things. You're a behavioral psychologist, so you know that there's all kinds of emotions. So the emotion is totally understood. And
I wasn't trying to. I'm not trying to be a downer.
No, it's not a downer at all.
I know for myself that impacted me probably more than anything, and this is why. Well, first, because he was supposed to fly. Mm-hmm. By the grace of God, he was put as supervisor on the ground. And like there was 2 helicopters out that night. One of them crashed. They all died. We had to bury our friends, which was tough. Because they were young. Mm-hmm. And we had just been actually at one of the pilots, we had just been at his wife's baby shower, so it was tough. But I'll tell you, right before that had happened, him and I had discussed this whole, him continuing on in his career, and we were starting to feel the toll, just from all the deployments, and then our kids, and we made a decision to actually move out of that and move back to doing more of like taxiing people around, not so much the combat stuff for him. And so we had made that decision. We hadn't told anybody yet. And then we went through that. And it's almost like we were like, you know what, this is the right decision for us, because our family has really, our family has served, and at that point it had been 15 years. So I think that whole experience, here's the really something else about that night that was super tough, is he called me and he said, you know where my blues are? And that's a certain type of uniform for the Air Force. There's different mm-hmm. uniforms. And he said, you know where my blues are? I want you to stick a pair of socks in there and I want you to bring it to me. But you can't be on the flight line. I'm going to meet you at the edge of the flight line. And he didn't tell me anything else. And I said, okay. So I got my oldest up at the time. I think he was 11 or 12 years old. And I said, Alex, I got to go to base and Dad's okay. And he's like, okay. So I drove out to base, looked my husband in the eye, who was super tearful, gave him his blues because he had to do a next of kin notification. Hmm. And at that point, that was like, what, we've done this and we've loved it, but we time
to move
ready for our next chapter.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was more than I expected. Mm. And but not surprising, and clearly shows in your character and the warrior that I see here today. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Tokyo Escapes, talk about what you're doing now, I'd like for you to share a little bit of those kinds of things. So we're going to take a quick break, hear a little more Ricky Jean Wright, and then we'll be right back to talk more with Mica Alexander. Thanks.
It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there. When you get there, you'll know. Funny how wisdom and youth.
Okay, we're back. And I am really inspired at this point. Getting an opportunity to hear a part of Mica's story that may have been a little depressing, but it's actually very uplifting to know a warrior's story, to know how the things that they've overcome, to see where they are right now, and know that they have made it to a much better place. We all have those in our stories. We don't always share them, and that's why it's emotional and it's hard to not only say, but it's hard to hear. And so, but Mica, thank you very much for sharing. I want to talk to you now. Let's come to the present. Let's come to the present and start focusing forward, like I always encourage my clients to do. And I want to talk about Tokyo Escapes. It's such a fascinating idea and everything, but I want to kind of hear why. You've got a behavioral science background. You've got 2 masters. You've been all over the world. Why Tokyo Escapes? Why are you doing this?
My why for a lot of what I do is my family, as I'm sure you just heard in the last segment. But it's really to serve and help others. And I think one thing that I have learned as a military spouse and having those opportunities to, go and visit different countries and cultures and languages is really, to tap into that adventure in me. And I think that when people travel overseas, many times people will go to Europe or other places like that where English is a dominant language, but people are a little more hesitant to go to Asia or to other parts of the world where English is not the dominant language. I know for myself, fortunately, I did learn a little bit of Japanese before we lived in Japan, and we lived in Japan almost 5 years. But when we got to Japan, I'll tell you this real quick story. When we got to Japan, we went in and, we're military folks. So wherever we go, we do a lot of things the first week. When we get in, we get our temporary goods. We go get cell phones. We usually get an automobile or 2. We enroll the kids in school. Like we're just, on fire. And we went, it was 2 days. We had been in Japan and we went to the cell phone place. And my husband sat down and I started talking to them in my somewhat broken Japanese English, trying to figure out phone plans and all this. My husband sat down and he just had this overwhelming look on his face. And he looked at me and he said, I can't read anything in here. I can't, how are we going to do this? This is really out of our comfort zone even, because we had been in Europe before that, which again, English is the dominant language, so we could get by. But I think that I tell that story because we established our company for people that want to go on an adventure, but might need a little bit of help. And I think because of our experiences, and then my love for people, I love people. I love sharing stories. I love connecting with people. That's always kind of been my groove. I'm a leader. Wherever I've been, I connect people and I bring people together, whether it be in work, whether it be in community, whether it be when I was helping a lot of the younger spouses get acclimated to a military life. So I think my love of people and adventure, and then just being there for people and taking them on, somewhere where they wouldn't go on their own, really. And Japan is amazing. It is, I can't say enough good things about Japan. It's the cleanest country. It's beautiful. Lots of rich history, and the people, they love us. I know when you think about our history together, less than 100 years ago, it's pretty amazing. So
Yeah,
that's
that's awesome. I totally relate to that value, and I can see it. I can see and hear in your voice the passion and the value that you want to provide,
yes.
and you're being inspired to serve in that way. It's pretty incredible. Having been on a trip to out of Barcelona, not even as onerous as Japan, but having a tour guide or having a local person who lived in Barcelona basically, and then was with us through our entire 14 days, showing us things that we couldn't have seen otherwise. I know that there's no way it would have been the experience, and I would have not had that. And so that's an awesome thing. So if anything, let me ask you this. So I get the value, I get the giving people the adventure. Um, so tell me where we go. If anything were possible, first thing you want to get through, what we're dealing with right now, which you're welcome to share,
Right.
how you're working through that. But so where are we going from here?
Well, I think so. We are scheduled to take people to the Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics, which we told our kids when we left, and when we left Japan in 2018, we said, well, and then when we heard the Olympics were coming, we're like, oh, we're going to try to come back to the Olympics. Well, it all worked out because then we started our company. So rebooking is the key right now. So I'm rebooking everything for the end of this year and the next year. And I did want to did want to remind people, or just so people are clear. So we're a custom tour company, and we put everything together. But here's the difference between us and everybody else. We go with you. So we take small groups, and usually it's led by myself. And so I can take you to the big tourist areas that you want to see. You see where the Lost in Translation movie was made, that kind of thing. But I can also take you to the local places. Still have a lot of friends in Japan and partnerships in Japan that are super excited to dress people up in kimonos or whatever. I can really get you feeling the local experience with Japanese that really really love Americans. Um, so I think now it's a matter of just pushing forward and rebooking everything, like I said, and getting ready. So whenever we can travel, we're ready. I did have to rebook a trip. So I am planning on traveling the end of October. I'm hoping that I won't need to rebook that one, and then get back to Japan and show people, part of the world. Like I said, it's a big world out there, and there's a lot to see and do, and it's fun. I mean, I can't say that enough. It's a lot of fun, and the food's pretty awesome too. So even if you don't like sushi, there's lots of hot food you can eat too.
So Tokyo Escapes? Do you see it? What is your vision? Is it a boutique? Is it Are you looking to get big? I mean, anything where possible. You mentioned your MBA. I have an MBA, but they really teach you how to run large corporations. It's not necessarily the entrepreneurial. I learned most of my entrepreneurial stuff many years after I got through my business school education, because I got real business education. So where do you see, and again, this is a vision. This isn't, I don't even accept, or you don't even have to tell me how you're going to get there. Just if anything were possible, what would Mica and Trent and your family and Tokyo Escapes, what would that look like?
I think keeping it small is key, because we want to provide that personal quality experience. I'm not looking to get too big. We just want people to have a great time and to see Japan and to be overseas and be comfortable. And we help them if they're uncomfortable, right? Whatever that may be. Like the last trip that I went on, a lady had broken her glasses. And so I took her in to get her glasses fixed and get a whole new set of glasses without an American prescription, which is kind of a big deal. But she's like, you know what, Mica, if you wouldn't have been with me, there's no way I could have done this. So being there for those kinds of things, and then having fun. So I think I would like to say in 3 to 4 years that my husband would join me full time, and this would be what we do. And we are having our kids help us. Now, don't get me wrong. I have had them doing some blogging, and they help with the logo. And when we go to the Olympics, they're definitely going to help, because what's kind of crazy is that we have teenagers, but I could literally tell them, people want to see this. Let's go into Tokyo. Let's do this. Then they would be like, okay, they know how to ride the train, and they all speak. I should say that we do all speak. So that helps.
Sure.
That definitely helps. But yeah, I mean, I think in 3 to 4 years, it'd be awesome if my husband could join me full time. And then this is what we do.
Great. Well, that's a great place to kind of take in our last break. And then when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about, we'll land the plane, talk a little bit about how we can get in touch with you and get involved in Tokyo Escapes or just get to know you better. So with that, I'm going to move on to the very last segment.
Funny how wisdom and youth are always two different games. The years flew by so fast, is the common human complaint. The memories in our minds turn to diamonds in our soul, and by the grace of God, on down the road.
All right, we're back for our final segment, and as I always do in Warrior versus Zombie, Mica, I want to ask you one question, and I don't think this is going to be too hard. You've come a long way, gone through a lot of stuff, and if somebody was listening to this and they got anything, just took one thing out of this from your journey that you would want them to take away, what one nugget, one warrior nugget, as I call them, what would you suggest?
That's a big question, David. Okay, I'll try to do my best. I would say, actually, I can think of two things. That's okay. One thing that that being a military spouse and my husband, I really credit this to my husband, is, I think that you need to ask yourself, what are you doing for others? What are you doing to make this world a better place? I think service, saying this is one thing, doing it is another. And I don't mean, there's some people that their service may be doing something at church, and that's great. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities to help people, even small things such as calling a friend when they're going through something. But I think service is a big one. So what are you doing for others, I would say. And the second thing is that when I think about our company, I think about our travels, I think about our life, is, you never get time back, ever. So you can always have things and material things and money and places and houses and all that, but you never get time back, ever. So I think, what are you doing with your time? Are you using it are you doing and seeing what you want to do? I think that, a lot of us, we work really hard at the first part of our careers, and then start having families, and maybe start taking just different things become important to us. So I know for myself, even our son is away at college, and with what's going on currently, I'm just like, oh, I wish he was home, make sure he's okay. And it's just, you never get time back. So I think service and time, how are you spending your time? Because, are you doing and seeing what you'd like to do? Life is, you only get one life. It's not like you get a redo.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Actually, those on the Warrior versus Zombie podcast, if you've listened to other episodes, you'll know that the song, it's not the getting there, it's a journey. And every day, and Mica knows, and I'm grateful that those that have listened to us, and I'm very grateful that she's chosen to invest this precious asset, resource of her time to serve us. So great advice, especially during hard times, right? When you're focused on others, and taking action there, it's kind of hard to focus on yourself. So tell us a little bit, Mica, about, so how can, give us the best way to get in touch with you, Tokyo Escapes. How can we follow you?
So real simple. So we have our website is tokyoescapes.com. And we also are on Facebook and Instagram, which I am on daily. And then our email is info@tokyoescapes.com. And all of our contact information is on all those websites, all those sources of media as well. So please, if you're interested in a bucket list tailored experience, we go and show, and we'll have a lot of fun. And the other thing I do want to say is, don't get me wrong, we're not going to be with you all the time. So we're going to give you time to explore on your own and maybe get lost a little bit, but we'll get you back to where you need to be. So tokyoescapes.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and email info@tokyoescapes.com.
Perfect. Definitely, it's going to be a unique experience, and I think that you'll have a lot of folks there. I happen to know that I have some people very close to me that are going to be going on a Tokyo Escape with you, so I'm very excited about that. So anyway, thank you, Mica. Thank you. This has been a very awesome journey for me, and I'm sure that the people in the audience, thank you to those warriors in the audience who have heard Mica's story and engage with us, and continue to please subscribe, share this episode, and share Warrior versus Zombie with your friends. We're going to continue to move forward with this in spite of everything. We're going to continue to have great guests like Mica on here. And so please listen, subscribe, share it with your friends. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on iTunes, the iHeartRadio, you name it, wherever, Spotify, wherever you can find a podcast, wherever you like to listen to your podcast, you can find us there. And we also will have a YouTube channel and other things, so you can find Warrior versus Zombie. And again, look for Mica. And again, I want to close out with the rest of It's Not the Getting There, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you the next time.
It's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there, when you get there you'll know. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there, when you get there you'll know.